The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Deanna Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. The opposition APNU plus AFC coalition is defending its desire to sit on the board of the Natural Resource Fund. 2 men will have to stand trial in the High Court for the murder of the Henry cousins. In regional news, doctors are to determine the cause of death of several divers in an undersea crude oil pipeline in Trinidad. For the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. Chairman of a Partnership for National Unity, Aubrey Norton, says the opposition coalition will today nominate a representative to sit on the governing board of the Natural Resources Fund, NRF. He says the decision has been taken to nominate someone as a board member and a member of the Oversight Committee, although there are concerns that the new Natural Resources Fund Act has not been properly passed.
In the real world of politics, if you leave the Natural Resource Fund without scrutiny, one, you will be excluding yourself from knowing what is happening, and two, you will be making the ground much easier for the PPP to not only continue to expand its corruption. And so we are taking a pragmatic approach which says we will challenge it, we will argue that it hasn't been legally passed until a court decides otherwise. But in the interest of the people of Guyana, we will contribute to a reduction in PPP corruption and to work towards the resources of our people going towards benefiting our people.
The APNU plus AFC believes that the new Natural Resource Fund legislation was not passed because the Speaker's mace had not been in the chamber of the National Assembly and several government parliamentarians had not been seated when the bill had been put to a vote. The mace had been removed by several opposition parliamentarians who had been protesting vociferously in the chamber during the Finance Minister Ashni Singh's presentation on the new law. The Public Service Ministry yesterday began training more than 12 government supervisors in communication skills. Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Public Service, James Cole, says the first training session for this year is aimed at fostering professionalism in the public service. He says the ministry is conducting research to ascertain the training needs.
Also, the introduction of the oil and gas sector and the transformation development within various sectors, the training department has conducted and will continue to conduct on-site survey to identify the gaps needed for the development of our country. Training is very important and critical in the public service. It caters to strengthen the goals as identifying our professional indicators for capacity building. It will also allow the programs to support and improve our overall performance within our work environment to facilitate organizational effectiveness.
The former head of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Dr. Vincent Adams, is insisting that ExxonMobil had taken out $2.5 billion insurance to cater for oil spillage. This after the company bluntly denied that it had ever agreed with a previous EPA administration about a 2.5 billion US dollars insurance. But Dr. Adams is challenging then ExxonMobil Guyana President Rudd Henson and the EPA administration to prove him wrong. Dr. Adams recalls successfully demanding insurance to that amount after a series of meetings that had involved the Bank of Guyana, the Insurance Association, and ExxonMobil, which had even submitted proposals on the subject. The former EPA chief said that insurance, which had been obtained in 2019, applied to certain types of occurrences, including an oil spill at any of the oil fields. In an effort to guard against the limited liability status of Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, Dr. Adams recalled that he had insisted on a letter of assurance from the parent companies, Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC, that they would be fully responsible should there be a spill. ExxonMobil has said that its local subsidiary, Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, have assets worth about $5 billion US dollars as of the end of 2020. ExxonMobil Guyana President Alistair Routledge says his company is working with the EPA and its co-venturers to put in place a combined $2 billion US dollars of affiliate company guarantees. He says that amount will exceed the equivalent guarantees required by regulators in Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. The Guyana Elections Commission yesterday appointed a new legal officer. He is Attorney at Law, Mr. Kurt Anthony De Silva. He is currently serving the President and judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice as a judicial counsel. Mr. De Silva holds a Master of Laws degree in Public Law from the University of the West Indies. Shortly after being called to the bar in Guyana in 2017, he served the Chief Justice and other judges of the High Court as a judicial research assistant. The Guyana Elections Commission says, based on his experience in both the CCJ and Guyana's High Court of researching legal issues, analyzing submissions in cases from attorneys at law, writing legal opinions for judges, and his knowledge of the new rules of procedure and the electoral laws, the Commission appointed Mr. De Silva as the legal officer. 2 men will have to face a High Court judge and a jury for the murder of the Henry cousins. Blatant Magistrate Peter Hugh yesterday ruled that there was sufficient evidence for 34-year-old Vinod Gopal, called Maga of Yakusari Blackbush Polder, Quarantine Berbice, and 33-year-old Anil Sanchara, called Dan Pole and Rasta of the Edward Village, West Coast Berbice, to be committed to stand trial for the indictable offense. Gopal and Sanchara were jointly charged and remanded to prison on Friday, January 15, 2021, for the murders of teen cousins Isaiah and Joel Henry in the Cotton Tree Back Dam, West Coast, Berbice. The bodies of the cousins Isaiah and Joel Henry were found mutilated 1 day after they went to pick coconuts in the No. 3 Village Back Dam. A postmortem found that the 2 teenage cousins had died of hemorrhage and shock due to multiple incised wounds. The main witness is 21-year-old Akash Singh, called Monkey, who is a younger brother of Anil Sanchara, one of the murder accused. And now news in the region. The bodies of several divers who were sucked into a 36-inch underwater crude oil pipeline off Pointe-à-Pierre, Trinidad, last Friday are to undergo postmortems. More in this report from TDT News Online.
The bodies of 3 of the 4 divers who were sucked into a 36-inch underwater crude oil pipeline off Pointe-à-Pierre last Friday have been removed to the Forensics Sciences Center. TTT News understands the bodies were taken to forensics this morning and are pending identification and an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The announcement of the recovery made by Paria Fuel Trading Company in a statement on Monday evening. Christopher Boudram, Faisal Kurban, Rishi Nagasa, Kazim Ali Jr. and Yusuf Henry were doing maintenance work on the pipeline when the tragedy occurred last week. Boudram was rescued that same day by diver Ronald Ramuta, a relative to Kurban. He is in stable condition at the San Fernando General Hospital. Attempts to retrieve the 4th body are still ongoing. Meanwhile, Paria Fuel Trading Company is denying that the body of the 4th diver has been found, as is being stated by Oilfield Workers Trade Union Executive Member Ozzy Warwick. Paria says all the affected families continue to be informed with timely updates, and earlier this morning were advised that recovery operations will continue relentlessly until the 4th body is found. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has expressed condolences to the loved ones of the 4 divers who lost their lives while on technical duty at Paria facilities in the Gulf of Paria. Dr. Rowley gave the assurance to the families that nothing will stand in the way of determining how the tragedy occurred. He committed that everything will be professionally executed by Paria and its associates in this matter, starting with the already announced independent investigation involving the best professional and technical expertise available to the country. The Prime Minister called upon citizens to be caring and comforting during this time.
That report from TTT News Online. 2 recently published studies document 35 new beetle species for the islands of Saba and St. Eustatius. Even with these latest additions, it is still estimated that nearly 3/4 of the beetle population is still unknown. Beetles play a vital role in breaking down natural waste and keeping insects in check, both important roles, especially for small Caribbean islands. Beetles represent some of the tiniest inhabitants of the Dutch Caribbean and play a critical role in the environment. They work as tiny decomposers and are vital in recycling nutrients from dead leaves and natural waste back into the ground. As predators, they can help keep insect populations in check, especially pests like caterpillars and aphids, which can damage crops. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. On the 7th day of fighting in Ukraine, Russia has intensified its assault on key targets, including ports in the south and the eastern city of Kharkiv. Russia says it seized control of the Black Sea port of Kherson, but its mayor says it's still held by Ukrainian forces. In the capital, Kiev, it's been eerily quiet. Our correspondent, James Waterhouse, is there with the latest.
President Zelensky has given another address this morning in his green military uniform behind a podium, seemingly still in Kiev, where he talks about the country being brought together closer in the last 7 days than it has done in the past 30 years when it first declared independence. So another defiant speech, but people are all too aware of what is happening in Kharkiv to the east, another night of intense fighting there, as well as to the south with this sizable Russian advance there as well.
As the fighting in Ukraine continues, oil and gas prices have risen sharply. The price of oil has gone beyond $110 a barrel, and wholesale gas prices have spiked to near record levels. Here's our business correspondent, Theo Leggett.
Energy prices today are shooting up. It's currently at the highest level since 2013, and that's despite a decision by the International Energy Agency members on Tuesday to release 60 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves. Under normal circumstances, more oil coming onto the market should ease prices. It hasn't, and that might well be to do partly with some of the comments made at the time, with the IEA's Executive Director Fatih Birol saying global energy security is under threat.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people are continuing to leave Ukraine because of the fighting. Poland says more than 450,000 Ukrainians have crossed the Polish border since the invasion began. Over 100,000 have gone to neighbouring Hungary. Taiwan's political leaders, including the president Tsai Ing-wen, are donating a month's salary to help people fleeing Ukraine. Officials have set up a bank account to allow other Taiwanese people to give donations. The Russian authorities have further tightened their control of the media, taking an independent radio station off air. Jenny Hill reports from Moscow.
Last night, the independent radio station Echo Mosky's programming was suddenly replaced by what listeners described as a hissing sound, and the Russian authorities have blocked access to its website, as well as that of a prominent television station. Meanwhile, state TV, which, like the Kremlin, calls the Russian invasion a special military operation, told their audiences that troops are gaining ground. An opinion poll by a state agency has reported that the proportion of Russians who trust Vladimir Putin has risen to more than 70%. But not everyone's convinced. An independent monitoring group said that 300 Russians were arrested yesterday for taking part in anti-war demonstrations.
World News from the BBC. The International Paralympic Committee is meeting in Beijing to decide whether to ban Russian athletes from the Winter Games, which start this week. The Russian team is already in China. Officials are coming under pressure to follow the example of governing bodies from other sports which have banned Russian teams from international events altogether. More major companies are distancing themselves from Russia in response to the invasion of Ukraine. The tech giant Apple has stopped sales of all its products in Russia. James Clayton is our North America technology correspondent.
Apple is the latest firm to have halted all product sales in Russia in a widening corporate backlash to the country's invasion of Ukraine. Apple doesn't generally like to put its head above the parapet when it comes to politics, making this move unusual and significant. Apple Pay and Google Pay are also being limited in Russia, both companies confirmed to the BBC. ExxonMobil has said it will discontinue operations in Russia and make no new investments in the country. American sportswear giant Nike paused sales in Russia on Tuesday.
One of Hong Kong's most prominent lawyers has left the territory after reports that he'd been interviewed by the National Security Police. Paul Harris, who until January was head of the Hong Kong Bar Association, was a well-known defender of human rights activists. During his tenure as head of the Bar Association, Beijing officials accused the British barrister of being anti-China. Police in New Zealand have broken up a protest by demonstrators opposed to coronavirus vaccine mandates, who've been camped near the Parliament building in the capital Wellington for several weeks. They used forklift trucks to remove tents and mobile toilets and towed away vehicles. Some protesters set fire to their camp as police moved in. 3 officers were wounded in the operation. 36 people have been arrested. BBC News.
The news was brought to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
Here now is a look at the lead stories once again. The opposition APNU plus AFC coalition is defending its desire to sit on the board of the Natural Resource Fund. 2 men will have to stand trial in the High Court for the murder of the Henry cousins. Regionally, doctors are to determine the cause of death of several divers in an undersea crude oil pipeline in Trinidad. And that's the news at the moment.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.